Good morning, audience. Today is 12/21, and I want to say, foremost, thank you for joining the show, the Red, White, and Blue Show with the Patriot Ben Garcia. And we're all looking forward toward Christmas here shortly on Saturday. So I definitely want to wish all of you a Merry Christmas. And today I have a special guest, Police Chief Steve Araguz, Estevan Calletano Araguz, out of Granger Police Force. How are you doing, Steve?
Good. Thank you, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Well, I greatly appreciate it. You know, on this show, we really want to support our law enforcement, and it's a hard love to have today. So many people want to talk about defunding. So many people want to go ahead and talk about how the police don't stand for professionalism, integrity, honor, loyalty. Well, I disagree with that 100%. Our men and women that wear the uniform put their lives on the line to make a difference and to serve our public and make sure that they provide a safe community. And, you know, when you're in trouble or something happens, you know, vandalism, theft, threats, domestic violence, alcoholism, you take a look, or drunk driving, or just people, you know, just flat out putting others at risk. You have to be able to depend on someone, and that's our law enforcement. They hold the highest standards of integrity, professionalism, honor, and loyalty. And I can tell you, for example, when I went to the Chaz and Chad Zone in Seattle, I saw how hard and how difficult it was for our men and women in uniform to go ahead and hold back and show restraint on people throwing, you know, intentionally in 2-liter bottles, which feces and mix at them. You know, as they're watching their city fall apart, and as they eventually watch their police department being taken over by people thought that their rights are more important than any other American by the use of violence. And I don't agree with that whatsoever. And, you know, we got to thank each and every one of our members of law enforcement. And if you honestly think you can do a better job than they can, after they've gone through schooling, after they've gone through training and continued annual training, you know, please feel free to wear the uniform and go through the whole process. And it's just not all physical. You got to also be able to go through the psychological evaluation and pass it. So, you know, for some of you critics, step up. I'd like to see you do it. But for me, I'm always going to go ahead and back the blue. You know, doesn't mean that anyone's perfect in any profession, but I'll tell you right now, they're more needed now than ever before. So, you know, Police Chief Araguz, thank you so much for giving me your time. I usually, you know, this show's about God, family, country, and, you know, you're a man of uniform, you're a man of tremendous integrity, and you're a man of tremendous accomplishments, you know, and people do know who you are because, you know, one, you're young. You know, I'm kind of jealous. You're a few years younger than me, and certainly, well, have a little bit more hair than I do. But what we do have in common is the fact we wear glasses, and it makes me feel like I can be part of you. So, you know what? Thank you so much. I'll get ready to get more into the interview here, but I always give glory to God because He shares it with nobody. And I want to start off with a scripture. And the scripture's Matthew 2, because it's Christmas time, and I want to, you know, tell you how important it is to share the Holy Scriptures. And I'm going to start off and read the coming of the wise man 2. Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judah, in the days of Herod and the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and we are come here to worship him. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, and demanded of them where Christ should be born, and they said unto him, In Bethlehem of Judah. For thus is written by the prophet, And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art now the least among the princes of Judah. For out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had privily called the wise men, inquired and them diligently what time the star appeared. And he set them to Bethlehem and said, Go and search diligently for the young child, and when ye have found him, bring me word again, that I come and worship him also. When they had heard the kings, they departed, and lo, the star which they saw in the east, and went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exciting great joy. And when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold, and frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned of God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. And hence they left to Egypt. You know, Christmas is an awesome time to be spending with friends and family and those that we care about the most. And we often think about the presents and seeing our especially me being a grandfather, seeing our grandchildren really rejoice in the moment when they're receiving a gift that's from the heart. And I got to tell you, I really, as I've gotten older and how my Christian values have continued to change and evolve, the gift of the Lord giving me my life for eternal life, in my belief that he came to save all of us. And that is the greatest gift of all. So I wanted to share that with you. And I wanted to thank you. And, you know, our country was founded on our Christian Judeo values. And our country is a very blessed, despite some of the social dysfunction that we have. We have people that are willing to stand up for God, family, and country. And this show is dedicated to having our folks who are in many different fields that want to continue to have those values and continue to share and protect our way of life. And I'm very honored, you know, today to have Mr. Araguz here, Police Chief Araguz, with all respect, because he shares those values and because he is an incredible individual who has, you know, got a story to tell. And we're going to talk about that story today. We're going to talk about how he goes ahead and serves our communities. People look up to him, not just the community, but the people in uniform look up to this individual. They look up to him because they need leaders. And he didn't just become a leader immediately. It's something that he built up over time. And he decided to go ahead and pursue another avenue to go and make more of a difference. So, Steve, I just want to go ahead and thank you for all the service you've done. I believe you've got 17 years. Can you tell me what got you started to become a police officer?
You know, Ben, policing is a long line of history in my family. My family has a long tradition of service, like yourself, a long tradition of service in the military and public service. And growing up, you know, we had role models in our home. My uncle was a my uncle was a deputy constable in South Texas, and as we grew up, my cousins became police officers, and those were my role models. As a youth, I found myself already knowing exactly what I wanted to do.
Wow.
When I turned that magic number of 21, you know, when I can carry a firearm handgun. And I knew I wanted to be a police officer. And so when I was in my adolescent years, I became a police explorer at the age of 14. And since then, up until now, I have not looked back. I've continued that long line of public service for myself, and I've actually turned that into an atmosphere into my immediate family. And I have a young nephew who's trying to follow in my footsteps as well, even though I keep telling him be a firefighter. It's still a long line of service, and he sees that, and he's trying to continue it on. You know, aside from being police officers or deputies or whatnot, there are some family members that I have that are cousins second cousins who are firefighters. We have a cousin in our family who lost his life as a fire captain, fighting a fire in South Texas.
Sorry to hear that.
And we also have some cousins that are currently Marines and some serving in the U.S. Army and the U.S. Navy. But you know, it's just a tradition in my family. It would be just like any tradition that you have in any family here in America. You know, and aside from our roots that we have, our personal roots, we, you know, raising cattle and cowboying. You know, the other side of on our professional side of my family is
Okay.
being law enforcement officers and firefighters and career service members.
That's incredible. I mean, you know, to have that long history of service, whether, you know, and it's all public service from what you're describing, you know.
Yes,
And
yes, it is. It's
yeah,
a lot of
I
years.
mean, and I gotta say, you know, you said your uncle who was a police chief,
He was a
and
constable, a deputy
constable.
constable. It's similar to a deputy sheriff.
Okay, you know, and I gotta tell you, you know, I find that inspiring. Um, Being able to go ahead and have a relationship with the community, who's trusting your judgment to go ahead and make a determination, you know, to keep, you know, people safe. So that's great leadership right there. Um, well, you know, I want to know a little bit more about what moment, I guess, really inspired you to say at 14 to join to Explorers. Was that something your mom asked you to do, or your father, or an uncle had asked you to do? Because I think today, I know when I was growing up, Sunnyside Police Department had the Explorers, and unfortunately, I really don't see those programs out here today. You know, at least in our valley, I'm not familiar with them, and you know, I really think that that would be something that we'd really need to be able to go ahead and give our youth inspiration and leadership quality. You know, can you tell me about that Explorer program when you joined at 14 and how you got started on that? Was that something you did, or was that something that was inspired by a family member?
You know, that's something that it goes both ways. It was inspired by family members, but growing up here in the Yakima Valley, the lower Yakima Valley,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it was a program back then in the late 80s, early 90s that was still fairly new. I believe it had met its just a little over a couple of decades of being created by the Boy Scouts of America. And it was to
Oh, okay.
snare in the youth, to give them something to do, to look forward to some sort of career in the future after high school, after college or the military. And that was, to me, it was inspired by a couple of cousins who did it, who were several years older than me. And I watched them go through those ranks. I watched them go from being police explorers to police officers out in the street, and I wanted to follow in those footsteps.
Okay.
You know, and so I knew exactly at an age of like, I think I was like 8, 9 years old.
Uh-huh.
I knew exactly what I wanted to do.
All
I
right.
became a freshman in high school, and that's what I wanted to do. And so, you know, when I joined and got accepted into the program, I can still look back and think back that those were some of the best times of my life, because, you know, what kid at 14 years old is going to go somewhere and be handed a police uniform
Uh-huh.
and asked to do ride-alongs with full-time police officers and watch firsthand as things transpire. You know, as they say, people who graduate high school and go to the military grow up pretty quick. Well,
Yeah.
I think that, you know, when we were younger and we did that, and I say we because there was a group of us that did it, when we
Mhm.
did that, we grew up pretty quick as well, because we saw things that the normal youth at that age didn't see. You know, and that's kind of where I got started. And like I said prior, I never looked back.
Uh-huh.
You know, and they say, you know, these kids grow up with role models in basketball or role models in football players. Well, my role models were police officers and police sergeants and captains and lieutenants and police chiefs. I wanted to be like them when I grew up.
How much guidance did those role models? I mean, now we're talking folks that are in the leadership position of the explorers. You know, it might be an SRO. It might be someone that's a sergeant with local law enforcement. Um, like, what were some of the things you may have learned from the leadership perspective at that age that helped guide you and build more of that integrity? Because it's so hard to go ahead and see people with honor, loyalty, and integrity because they're so busy in their professional fields.
Mm-hmm.
But yet you're now involved in a high risk field, right? Where you're seeing people's lives every day, and unfortunately, you're not seeing the best of that moment. You're responding to a call at the age of probably 15, 16 as a ride along, you know, and you're seeing a domestic violence situation, or maybe a beating, or hopefully not much worse. It could be up to a capital crime, a murder or whatnot. You know, how, and you talk about that growing up process. Well, at your age, and you're seeing these mentors who are professional police officers going in there and risking their lives to help others. What did you learn from that? I mean, can you talk about an incident maybe that really say, this is the field? Because some people go into the military, they've seen Rambo, they've seen Black Hawk Down, and then all of a sudden, you start hearing live rounds, or you start hearing commotion, distress, you start feeling the jitters, and you're not the one necessarily in control of the situation. You're participating in the situation, but not necessarily in control, and you certainly don't know the outcome. So how was that first couple of experiences of duress when you were an explorer? Can you let me in on any of that?
Sure, and that's kind of a two-part question there, and I'll answer your first one. One of the major things I learned, a couple of major things that I learned as a kid, growing up and donning that uniform and shadowing some of those police officers who are now passed on, rest in peace.
Yes.
One of the things that I learned from those men and women, very first thing I learned from them was loyalty. They were very, very loyal to this profession. They were beyond loyal. I can't even express how loyal they were.
Mm-hmm.
They would always go beyond the call of service to do something for their community or to do something individually for someone. The other thing I learned from them was their honesty. It didn't matter what it was, the slightest thing, anything that had to do with integrity. They passed on that trade to me, and what it meant to them is what it means to me. Now, integrity is your number one thing in this profession.
Amen.
Never taint that. Never taint that for anything or anyone, because your integrity means everything to you. And they passed that on to me, and that went along the lines of loyalty. Being super loyal to the profession, to the people they served, and all that encompassed honor. That's what it means to be honorable in this profession. And trust. That was another
Amen.
thing. This profession, you have to have trust. The trust of your peers, the trust of your subordinates, the trust of the public, the trust of your colleagues, and the trust of your leadership that you serve. And that I took that with me as I got older, as I moved into this profession as a young police officer, as a reserve police officer, and then as a police officer, and to date, I take that seriously. My integrity means everything to me, and I make sure that no matter what I do or where I go or what I say, I make sure that is an atmosphere I present to anyone who comes in contact with me. You've gotten to know me over time.
Yes, sir.
And you know that my integrity means everything to me.
Yes, sir.
And with that said, growing up, some of the things that taught me was if you did something wrong, you owned up to it. If you did
Absolutely.
something good and you got praise for it, you kept that to yourself and you continue to do the same thing over and over again. You know, I remember as a kid walking through the halls of the police department, right next to the police chief's office, there was a sign that said, "Do the right thing when no one is watching." And to this
Right
day, I
on.
remember that. And I pass it on to my kids, to my colleagues, the subordinate officers that work with me, because they don't work for me, they work
Right.
with me. You know, and so I hold that dear to me, and that's why when you asked for my resume and I gave you my resume, under my name are my values, my personal values, and as you can see, the very first one is integrity under my name.
Absolutely.
Because I want, when people say my name, I want that to be the number one thing that comes to mind is my integrity. You know, and to answer your other question, you know, what kind of a positive or negative impact did it have on me to see some of the things I did as a youth growing up and donning that uniform? You know, it didn't have any impacts per se that were negative, but what it did do for me positively was it showed me firsthand what life was like out in the streets. After you turn your lights off and you go to bed with your family, there is another life out here in these streets, and almost 3 decades ago, it has changed a lot.
Okay.
The violence that we had with the gangs, the violence that we had with the drugs coming into town or leaving town or what have you. Times have changed. You know, where we used to see a lot of fist fights in the street or whatnot. Times have really changed, and I can't sit here and tell you what's the attribute to those changes. I can tell you that some of it is social, but I can tell you what it did for me was it made me grow up pretty quick. It made me think about life. It made me cherish life. It made me pass on some things to my friends and family that would hang out with me, and hopefully they would take on that same value of life as I did growing up.
Okay.
Because I knew then, and I know now, that this life, I mean, it comes and goes, and in an instant, it's gone. It could be gone.
Absolutely
And it doesn't
true.
matter what profession you choose or what you do in life. I mean, when it's your time to go, it's your time to go. And that's one of the very first things I remember learning really young. I believe I was probably 15 to 16 the very first time I went to a homicide scene, an actual homicide scene
Wow.
where somebody was murdered, and I got to walk inside the line, inside the what we call the security line.
How did that moment feel? You know,
It
being
was very different than sitting down at home and watching it on TV, because this was actually a person who once lived,
Yeah.
is now deceased, and you know, as the officers moved about doing their job, I actually got to help. So helping them do their job, I was kind of the go get this, go get that, go do this, go do that, go say this, go say that.
and it's all important, you know.
It made me feel
Excuse me.
very valued at the time as a kid. It made me feel very valued, and I remember going to school that Monday and not sharing it with anybody at school, because at that time, in my mind, I felt as though I was protecting the adolescent integrity of my friends and fellow schoolmates at my school by not telling them what I had seen, and instead of just going about my business. That's how I felt at the time. I don't know how I would feel now seeing that, or I would probably, you know, say, hey, this is what I saw, or whatever, to friends, socially. But back then I didn't. I felt like it was my duty to
keep respect, possibly to keep respect of what you had seen, because like you said, it's not something you saw on TV, and you know, you're talking about a situation of someone within your community that people know, and to probably respect that of possible family members. You know, you're saying, you know, you're keeping this to yourself. You know, I can, you know,
right.
I
And
can
it did
only
not
suggest.
have, you know, I don't want people to think that it had, oh my God, it had an impact on this kid's mental stability.
Right.
It did not have that kind of an impact. You know, it didn't affect my
It's a respect.
my overall wellness, if you will. It did not affect it. What it did was, did it make me grow up quicker? Sure it did. Did it make me have more respect for life and understand the ins and outs of growing up? It did. It was a tool
Mm-hmm.
that I was putting in my toolbox at the time that I didn't know that was happening
Right.
until I got, a lot substantially older.
When that incident happened, did you talk to your uncles who had been in law enforcement or maybe firefighters? Say, hey, when you went to your first scene of a homicide, or you responded to a tragic accident, what firefighters would do, and whatnot in recovery aspect, how did you respond to them and ask, do you think it's weird feeling what I'm feeling, because even for an adult, if you see someone that's incapacitated, unable to go ahead and protect themselves.
Well, like I said,
know.
don't take it as it had a negative
Right.
effect on my mental wellness. It had no negative effect on my
Mhm.
mental wellness. What it actually did was it made me have a better understanding of life
And the
a
professionalism.
far better respect for what life really was.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
had. I didn't go home and think about it for months, years. I didn't.
No, I
What
understand.
what I did do several years down the road was shared that story with other like-minded police officers
Mhm.
and other colleagues who were in the public sector, and we've kind of intermingled that. What
Mhm.
was it like at your first scene? Oh, well, this is how it made me feel.
Yeah.
And that was my portion. This is how it made me feel. I was very young when I was introduced to the gruesomes of this profession,
Right.
if you will, and it had no negative impact on me. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and say that this job has never had a negative impact on my overall mental wellness. It has, but at that time, at that age, it did not, because I was I cannot remember if I was 15 or 16. I
Right.
was in between. I'm gonna say I was 15, going to be 16. I can remember in my head not thinking, "Wow, this is cool," because you're talking about a person.
Right.
But I
Well, it's not a
remember
video
thinking,
game.
exactly.
It's
And
not a
back
video
then-
game.
Back then, there was really no video games like
Yeah.
there are now.
Right.
We're talking here early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what it did for me was it just made me cherish my family more.
Absolutely.
If you will. It made me it made me think
Respect
of
life.
life and have
Mhm.
respect for it more than it did affect me negatively, as in,
Yeah.
now I need some counseling, or now I need to talk to somebody. I didn't feel that.
Well, you'll see that in the professional field. I mean, you'll take a look at law enforcement, and military that have been in very dramatic and under duress in positions, and those things are have an impact, but it's also something that you do respect. I know I can say when I was in Iraq, to develop much more respect for my life and those around me, because you're looking for IEDs, you're looking for sniper fire, you're looking for things that don't look right. If it ain't in place, you didn't put it there, you leave it alone. A number of things are going through your head as you're going through your mission, but a sense of awareness that most people don't understand, a sense of respect of how valuable your life is. You can say right now you're on the mission, you could have another buddy right beside you, and you're breathing right now. At that moment you're alive, because your next moment isn't guaranteed. Right. So you understand how fragile life really is, because at a normal age, you're a teenager, and you're thinking you're invincible. You can do all these push-ups, you can run as fast as the wind, you can do all this stuff, and nothing hurts you. You fall down, get back up, no big deal. You expect, to go ahead, and when you compete, let's say you lose to a team, and you say, I'll see you next week, bro. We're going to beat you next time. Where in the military and law enforcement, when you're in those situations, if something breaks down or you misjudge something, there is a possibility you're not coming back home.
Right.
And that's the reality. It's a factor you're participating, but you don't have the control factor completely. And that's what you're looking at, because you're looking at as a teenager seeing, wow, I'm not invincible. And there are things beyond your control, and the outcome may be the most dramatic loss of life.
Right.
And that, that realization, and it's not so much something, I should say, that you know affects your mind or anything, as much as you realize the conscious is woken in a different way, saying, wow, I'm participating to go ahead and respect this body, this individual, and I want to see justice done.
Right.
And
And it at that time,
mhm.
like I said, growing up, we raised cattle. To date, my dad still raises cattle,
Uh-huh.
and it made me have an appreciation for watching the calves being born, or
Right.
going out there in the pastures and helping, um, helping with these calves being born, and
Well, that's a big part of your life. I know
branding
you.
cattle, that
Hmm. Riding horseback.
I knew that right then and there, the first time I saw a brand, I knew right then and there that I never wanted to be branded.
That hurts. Well, you know what? I got to tell you, this is what our youth need to realize. They got video games that desensitizes them. They have movies, and we saw plenty of movies as we were growing up. Whether it was Rambo or Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Right.
And in these movies.
There are times, I will tell you, there have been times
Mm.
in my career where I had some scary times.
Yeah.
Some times where I felt I was not going to go home.
Yeah.
And those are the times when I did reach out.
Yeah.
I was blessed to have some counseling
Mhm.
that helped me walk through those tough times. And of course, family, surrounding myself with family, and spiritually.
Yeah.
Because you have to have some sort of
Resolution.
stability spiritually
Mhm.
to understand that, hey, when we're done here,
Yeah.
there's something else where we're going to go, somewhere else where we're going to go, that's waiting for us. I have a high respect for anybody who believes in a higher authority than what we have now.
Amen.
And I go back to, when the war kicked off, my best friend, who to this day is still in the Army, 20 some years, and he's a man that I believe is he's invincible. He's made out of steel, twisted steel, and just a solid man. And when I think of integrity, I think of this man. His soldiers have a very high respect for him, and when this war kicked off, and I can't believe it's going to be almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
He went over there and he lost soldiers, young soldiers, teenagers,
Yeah.
who were fresh out of high school. And I can remember sharing some stories with him and him sharing stories with me. And I can remember telling him, never forget that after this life, there's another life. We just haven't taken that step yet. It doesn't matter if it's on our side or the other side. There's somewhere that we're going to go and do something. It doesn't matter what the belief is. And there for a while, this, Ben,
Mhm.
there for a while there was a stigma on a certain religion, that people perceive that religion to be completely evil. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, as a society, and this through social
Mhm.
media, as a society, when we point a finger, it tends to turn into a finger of sheep,
Mhm.
and the sheep run to it, and I think that's what happened. Well, I disagree with that narrative. I agree that anybody who has a spiritual belief and that it's positive should be allowed to pursue that, and that's what makes our country so great.
That is true.
In our Constitution, we're allowed to do that. By our own laws, we're allowed to believe in something like that.
I agree. I'm gonna say, somebody asked me a question about what I think about people in the Middle East. About Arabs specifically, And I go, people are people throughout the world. We have much more in common than we really do know. I was very much able to go ahead and communicate and share my beliefs with others. And not necessarily I'm talking religiously. I'm talking, about some of the common things. Talking about food, talk about where they're coming from, talk about what it is that they do for a living. But you know, we all, for the most part in this world, want to be able to go ahead and be safe, take care of our families, and be a positive contribution to our community. And whether that's in the Middle East or here, irregardless, the majority of people want that. Unfortunately, sometimes we have some bad people that want to tell us how we need to live our life. But people are people overall, and I certainly agree. Let me go ahead and take a moment, a break here. I want to remind you to please go ahead and purchase this pamphlet. It's both in English and in Spanish. It's the Constitution of the United States, and this is the National Center of Constitutional Studies. Their phone number is 800-388-4512. And I want to just remind you, please go ahead, purchase this, pass this out. It is so critical that folks understand what our constitutional rights are, and especially our young folks. And I also want to go ahead, and I love sponsoring the VFW. I'm an unofficial sponsor. I want to go ahead and say a lot of our men and women that have veterans of foreign wars, numbers are dwindling in membership. And they're a critical part of our American history. A lot of our World War II veterans are disappearing by the moment. I hate to say that, but that's a fact of reality. And the other aspect is we're seeing a lot of our Vietnam veterans go away. And those are our brothers and sisters in arms that contributed toward our freedoms. And they're a big part of our society. I want to make sure that you please become a member and try to give the time that you can, because it's important. And if you have ideas how to make it better, how to reach out to our community, whether it's working with our law enforcement locally, in whatever way to go ahead and contribute, please do. Just because the uniform comes off does not mean that service ends. So I'm a big backer for our VFWs, and I'm a big backer of getting this pamphlet for the Constitution of the United States. And we'll be returning to our program. Thank you. All right, Steve, thank you for continuing to stay with us. We talked about the Explorer, we talked about your youth, we talked about your experience. I want to talk about a little bit of what it is once you turn 21 and you were able to be a police officer at entry level. Okay, you went from having years of experience as an explorer, which I'm sure contributed much, but as an entry officer, all of a sudden your peers are looking at you differently, because now you're not an explorer, you're not somebody that they're just supporting. Now you're expected to know your job. Can you tell me what it was as you went through the academy, and then get that graduate, then become an entry officer, how your peers looked at you differently, and what did you expect?
Sure. I can remember many years ago changing uniforms. I remember being told, you're too old to be a police explorer.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah, you're too old to be. I can remember even being told you're too young to be in the Explorer program, and you have to be a freshman. And that was the hardest part, waiting to turn from 13 to 14, waiting. That was hard. But I can remember being told, hey, you're too old now, and now you have to move on to the reserve officer program.
Okay.
Is that something you're interested in? Well, it was without hesitation, of course, that I said yes and accepted that commission right away. And probably not going to be surprised when I tell you the very next day I donned that uniform.
Yeah,
I
nice.
went to work as a volunteer police officer without pay. I didn't need any pay, and to this day, I don't really think compensation is something that we don't even think about when we do this job.
You're doing it out of your heart and soul.
Back then, it was because you loved it, and that's what you wanted to do. It didn't matter if you got paid a dime, and it didn't matter what you got paid. You did it.
Uh-huh.
Anyways, I can remember donning that uniform and jumping in a police car with a 10-year veteran at the time of
Okay.
the police department who was to be my training officer, and I was expected to know many things, far more things than what a true entry-level reserve officer was expected to know.
Okay.
A green person that would come in with no knowledge of the job, no knowledge of procedures. By the time I was 21, I was expected to know certain things because I had already been there almost 6+ years.
So
And
you went from Sunnyside being an explorer. Now, are you in the Sunnyside Police Department at this time as an entry level reserve officer?
Yes, I was still there.
Okay.
I was still there, so I kind of grew up there.
Okay.
And I remember jumping in the police car with an officer and him saying, "Let's go and see, and see what the traffic is doing." And I remember him telling me, "Hey, stop this car.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna stop it for not having I think it had like a bad tail light or something."
Uh-huh.
And I remember just the adrenaline rush going through my body.
Wow.
I had been on probably hundreds of traffic stops, but I had never conducted one myself.
Okay. Okay.
I had been trained to do it in the Police Explorer Academies over the years, and I had watched many police officers do it, but I had never done a real one on my own. I can remember
The responsibility is all on you at this point.
exactly. I remember not knowing I remember not remembering what to say on the radio to the dispatcher.
Uh-huh.
But the funniest part out of that whole story was when the car was coming to a stop, I stopped behind it, and I remember the FTO saying, why are we stopped too far behind this car? Get closer.
Uh-huh.
And I remember taking my foot off the brake and stomping on the gas.
Oh, wow.
And it propelled the patrol car forward. Scared the crap out of the FTO.
Oh.
I remember him holding onto the dash and shouting, "What are you doing?" And I slammed on the brakes, and he kissed the windshield.
Oh my God.
And then I remember.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I remember him scolding me, but then laughing, and then we went out and made our traffic stop, our contact, and what have you, and the guy went on his way. But when we got back into the car and sat down, he looked at me, and when I looked at him, he started laughing so hard he could not stop laughing, and I started laughing so hard we just could not stop laughing. That was my very first traffic stop.
Wow.
On the very first day, in the very first hour of being a reserve police officer.
Wow. These things happen.
And that was I can't believe this. That was 23 years ago.
Wow. That's amazing. And goofy things happen. Like you said, you'd been an explorer for a number of years. You got to points that you're too old to be an explorer. Now you're a reserve officer, and you're transitioning. You've seen a lot of things. You've experienced a lot in the community. The community knows who you are. You know these officers. And all of a sudden, everything changes because now you're the one having to write the RCW. You're the one having to go ahead and when you did your traffic stop, whether lights out, whatever the case is that you're writing up, and now you're putting your name, your very first, ticket out there with your name on it.
Right.
We all have our moments.
Yeah.
We all do.
It was something that I'll never forget. I'm sure he'll never forget it either.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's a great way to lead on to, development, because you had spent a number of years as an explorer. And how many years were you as an entry-level officer? How many years was it?
So I spent I asking me to do math, and that's my
Uh,
point. I spent just probably half a decade, maybe just a little over,
okay.
as a
It's
reserve
almost
police
6 years.
officer before I went on to become a full-time officer. I spent some time working out at the Hanford Reservation on the nuclear site
Okay.
as a nuclear security officer. I spent some years doing that.
Okay.
And gained some valuable experience.
And that's if well, that's on a different federal level at that point.
That was a state level because it
State?
was a
Okay.
state-run nuclear power plant.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
the best part about it was I worked with people who were fresh out of the military.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those folks were, I'll tell you, some of them are still there. Great individuals,
Uh-huh.
very, very calloused and very, very war hardened. They were
Yeah.
fresh up from the war, from the Iraqi war.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a lot, and I can't emphasize that enough. I learned a lot from those people. Just
Right
being
on.
around them, everything was paramilitary, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
From our chief of security down to the last guy, I would say that 80% of the people I worked with were
Military.
Marines, Army,
Mm-hmm.
and you name it. It was a diversity of military jobs, from military policemen, special forces,
Mm-hmm.
mechanics, what have you. But it was a time when I was not only in the reserve program as a volunteer police officer, but I worked there,
Mm-hmm.
and I can remember going and annually qualifying at the police department and always mostly taking Top Gun.
Yeah.
Because of my training out in Hanford, the military training, the paramilitary training that we got out in Hanford. I mean, it just went hand in hand with.
Well, you did a lot of shooting over there, didn't you?
We did so much shooting. I just told this story the other day.
Yeah.
I remember going through the training course out there, and I think it was like 1 week or 2 weeks of straight shooting,
Uh-huh.
10 hours a day, and I remember the pad on my finger grew a blister, and taping it. A lot of us taped it, but these were, again, these were military hacks. As
Yeah.
a civilian, I didn't know, the ins and outs, the little things that military servicemen and women do to stay comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know them as a civilian, and when I went to go work out there, these folks, they knew them. So when you grew blisters somewhere, hey, tape it like this, or hey, do that,
Yeah.
or hey, let me see your pack, I'll do this for you, and you'll be way more comfortable, or what have you.
A lot of little tricks.
Yeah, a lot of little tricks. I
Mhm.
remember punching holes when we qualified
Uh-huh.
out there, and when you say punching holes, there was really nothing to score
Mm-hmm.
on the target because it was a perfect hole. You
Yeah.
punched the hole right in the center of it. That was what you did. And so it was a great time. So sorry to digress.
No. It's
a great
good
story
stuff.
That adds on.
No, it's about your life. It's
my
about
whole
your
Hanford
time.
I mean, that was.
Uh-huh.
I had a blast.
Nice.
I bet the majority of the time, aside from doing our job, 90% of the time we spent laughing. Because of the military stories. Some of those guys, they've passed on now. May they rest
Yeah.
in peace. They were great
Amen.
warriors in life. They were ex-Vietnam vets.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the best stories I ever heard from the military were Vietnam vet stories, because they were just
It was a much different
funny,
war. Yeah.
different times,
Yeah. Yeah.
different people,
Mm-hmm.
and the things they did, in the military in the 60s and early 70s,
Are much different than.
much different than the kids that were coming in and working with us out in Hanford, who were
Yeah.
just fresh out. And we say it now when we tell war stories in policing. We tell the younger generation, this is what we used to do when we started, and
Right.
they just shake their head. Well, it would be funny to hear the Vietnam vets tell their stories
Yeah.
and see the younger group just shake their head and say, we would have never got away with that. Of course, out there, like I told you, Hanford has the same hierarchy as the military.
Yeah.
Some of our captains out there, they were ex-Vietnam vets, and of course they would always remind us, they'd tell stories and then they would remind us, now it's a story, don't go doing this.
Yeah.
But some of the lingo and everything was just too funny. It was a great time.
Yeah.
Something I'll always cherish. Like I said, some of those warriors are gone now,
Yeah.
but they'll never be forgotten. Some of those Vietnam vet guys, some of them are still alive, kicking,
Yeah.
and they're just enjoying retirement, loving it.
And good for them.
Good for them.
Yeah, absolutely. it's hard when you want to go ahead and serve. You know, Hanford, just so that people know, Hanford's a nuclear facility site, and it was developed in World War II and helped bring an end to World War II. It was a huge contributor to that end, to the contribution of the atom bombs that were there, that were used in Nagasaki and Hiroshima in Japan during World War II. And so Hanford has quite a legacy today and in its past, you know, and those they're not soldiers, paramilitary officers that are on that base are there to protect what we see as a critical part of our national security. You know, so it's not just all about shooting, but you better be pretty good to be on that team, because I do know some of those members on that team, and they're filled with, like you said, Marine Force Recon, Army Rangers, sometimes Special Forces. So when you go look at them and you think you're just gonna go say, well, you know, you got a uniform on, but I'm not worried about you, buddy. You might run into a surprise with their reaction, and they're pretty diligent, and they are very professional. And so if you run into them, you ever get to Hanford, just listen to what they got to say. They'll help you. They'll be kind and courteous also, but just follow the rules. You know, so I just wanted to go ahead and give a little bit of information out there about our Hanford site. You know, and you know, we're talking about you're basically 6 years. You went from explorer to reserve officer to being on the Hanford site and whatnot. Now you've got just a number of skills that, you know, let's be honest, most police officers in the country wouldn't even have that type of paramilitary experience unless you've been in the military itself. You know, so it's a different mindset in some aspects of what they're bringing from a war to you know, protect and serve in the country. A lot of different guidelines and different laws. Right. But I want to go ahead and talk about what inspired you to go into leadership and head toward, and what did you have to do? What inspired you, and what did you have to do to get where you're at today in a leadership position?
Well, Ben, the inspiring part, like I told you before, were the mentorships that I had growing up as a young adult. You know, I can sit here and think back, so many different faces and names, the bars on the collars, the stripes on the sleeves, and even out in the Hanford Reservation, you know. One of my mentors there, I have a couple of them, and some of them I follow on Facebook. Mr. Forrester, he was our chief of security out in Hanford, and although he was just a hardened Marine, a veteran of the Iraqi War, and just a no-nonsense type of man who commanded respect no matter where he walked into.
Yeah, you saw him, you knew.
You knew.
You knew.
You know,
yeah.
And the times I got trouble out there, because I got trouble sometimes. I ended up in his office. The first thing you'd see walking in was kind of like with you sitting here.
Yeah.
Was an American flag draped and a United States Marine Corps flag draped.
Amen.
Right behind him, and his awards and his accomplishments, and just the way he spoke and how he conducted himself. Although you were in trouble, and although he was the boss and you were his subordinate, he always had a funny way of letting you know through his vocabulary that you screwed up.
Yeah.
But it was going to be okay because you were still one of his kids.
Yeah.
You know, and we weren't his Marines.
Right.
But we were his kids.
Like a first sergeant, a top.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And he was an officer in the military, and I don't remember what his rank was in the Marine Corps, but he was an officer. And I can remember a lot of the folks disliked him.
Wow.
Because he was just to the point.
Yeah.
He was there to do a job, and he did it very, very well. And after I left, I remember thinking, you know, I want to be like this guy one day.
Yeah.
I want people to feel when I have to do something hard, I want people to feel like he made me feel it's gonna be okay. We're gonna get through this, no matter what. can remember seeing him in my mind and how he conducted himself, and many more others, you know, throughout my life. You know, a couple of sergeants who've passed on now,
Rest their souls.
and and their mentorships, their leadership styles,
Mm-hmm.
and even after I became a full-time officer, you know, and I had some bad leaders in there, and I learned some things from them as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in this job, you're always constantly learning, and we learn from watching others do this job. You know, and I just came back from a leadership course in the Tri-Cities, and we had a long discussion about good leaders versus bad leaders, and what we learned from them both. You know, and even though there are bad leaders out there, you still learn qualities from them.
Mm-hmm.
Good qualities, because everybody has a good quality in them. Doesn't matter
Absolutely.
who they are. There's going to be a good quality. We're all human, you know. And as I progressed, as I got older in my profession, I found myself constantly steered towards leadership.
Okay.
I worked in Toppenish for a number of years. I was a police officer there, and
So you've gone from Sunnyside.
yeah,
You've gone to Hanford.
I worked for the city of Mapton. Mapton is who hired me as an entry-level police
Oh,
officer.
okay. Okay.
They were the ones who gave me the opportunity to step in full-time into this profession.
Okay.
And I left Hanford to go to Mapton, which was a severe salary difference.
Reduction. Yeah.
But it didn't matter because it was full-time law enforcement. It's what I wanted to do. I was ready for it. I felt like I had grown a number of calluses throughout my life, personally and professionally. Like I told you, Hanford really propelled me. It really made me grow up,
Okay.
mature a lot, because you were around people who were right out of the military. Everything was so paramilitary.
No.
It was just a part of you.
Yeah.
And it just made you mature, and it made you know that at a certain hour, at a certain time, you had to perform, and when that hour was up, you could be yourself and go do whatever you want. But from
Right.
this time to this time, there was an expectation, a very high standard, and you needed to meet that expectation. And that very high standard in order to perform for 12 to 14 hours.
At that high level.
Do what you need to do afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember a guy who had spent 30-some years out there working and had spent 20-some years in the military. He had 50 years of that lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I remember him telling me, if you can work here and last 2 years, you can live here and work anywhere and last forever.
Yeah.
I remember him saying that, and he was not lying.
Yeah.
Because I'm still here.
There you go. And not just, you just went beyond entry level, you went into leadership, you went to school.
Yes.
How was that experience?
So my education, my formal education came far after my high school. So,
Okay.
As a kid, I just wanted to do this job. I was an adolescent. I wasn't a perfect kid. As I got older, my parents were very, very strict. My dad has an extremely high work ethic to this day.
No.
I told you he raises cattle. So
Yeah, he
I should
does.
Tell you something.
Yeah.
This is a man that's up at 4:30 in the morning for no reason. Makes his own coffee, grinds his own coffee, brews his own coffee, makes his own fresh flour tortillas.
Wow.
Makes his own salsa.
I want to go have breakfast.
It's great stuff, but the salsa is extremely hot.
Oh, okay.
Goes to work, puts in his 12, 13, 14 hours a day, comes home, sips coffee, and goes to bed. So that's my dad. It's been him for many, many years, and he instilled that in me. And I just, for whatever reason, when I was a kid, I just felt that school just wasn't for me.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that I wanted to go to work, and so at a very young age, I had kids. I went to work, but because I wanted to do this profession, the only thing that correlated to it as a young man at the age of 18 was doing security work. So I went to go work in security. Never mind parties or drinking or never mind. I wanted this. And so I went after it in a different route. I didn't graduate high school. I went and earned my GED. And I just kind of went on and I pursued it. Along the way, I met so many people who kept passing a baton to me, who kept pushing me forward. And here I am because of it. So how I got into formal education is kind of funny. You know, there's a quote from General Patton that says that he never judged a man by how high they got or how high they rose in their career. He judged the man by how far up they bounced after they fell in their career. And that's what happened to me. You know, when I was a police officer in Toppenish, I spent a number of years working there, and
Okay.
whatever diversity of jobs they had in that department, I did it. Minus
Okay.
the chief of police and the captain's position. Other than that, I did every single job there, and because I wanted to be a master of that,
Craft.
sure,
Yeah.
if you will, but I wanted to be
Professionalist.
a master of knowing every job in that department.
Mm-hmm.
We had corrections at the time. We had corrections. We had detectives, and in detectives, you had major crimes and general crimes. I got to work general crimes primarily.
Mm-hmm.
I got to work with the task force, the U.S. Marshals Task Force.
Okay.
I helped do narcotics investigations, a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
But if for your
So
listeners, Toppenish is on the Yakima Nation Reservation, and if anybody knows anything about the reservation, we know that right now it's being catapulted with a lot of high crime, a lot of
homicides. A lot of missing people. A lot of missing people.
I just read that article in the paper
Yeah.
about the homicide rate, and that's you know, when I tell people that's just life on the reservation, people get used to it. But when I worked there, I always wanted to make that difference. I didn't want people to get used to having
Right.
to live with high crime, so I was a very active police officer.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, and this leads me into how I ended up getting formal education.
Right.
I ended up getting promoted after I had already been a detective, a patrol sergeant for a few years. I ended up getting promoted to the rank of sergeant.
Okay.
And as a probationary sergeant, I didn't meet my probationary period. I didn't meet the expectations and standards of the chief of police at the time.
So you had a stumble.
I did. So he demoted me from that position back down to patrol, and it
Okay.
was tough. It was tough. It was a big black eye at
It
the
hurt.
time in my profession. It hurt. But remember when I told you I had started this job and this career at such a young age,
Yeah.
and I had learned so many things throughout life, and remember I told you how precious life was?
Absolutely.
I had always remembered that. I never forgot that. And when that happened to me, I didn't go home and say, well, you know, this is where the road ends. I'll just continue on. I didn't do that. I've never been one to do that.
So you
Never.
felt inspired, or you felt driven?
It inspired me
Okay.
to say two things. Number one, I'm not holding myself back, and I'm not settling for second best.
There you go.
And number two, a stumble does not mean a fall.
Yeah.
And even though it's a fall, there's always a get up for it.
That's right.
Because if you've ever been bucked off a horse, or ever been bucked off cattle, a steer, as we jumped on steers as kids, we were
Yeah.
If you've ever been bucked off, you know how hard it hurts, but you always get up. I tell my little
Right on.
girls now, I have little girls at home, horses. You fall off your horse, you get back up, and you move on. You get back on your horse. And that's exactly what I did. So I had to take a look at the time, stop and take a look at my profession, what I was missing, what my mentors in the past had done, what leaders before me who had come and gone had done to get to those positions. I had had a taste in leadership as a patrol sergeant, and I just loved it.
Yeah.
I loved motivating other people. I loved inspiring them. And when that was taken away, I told myself, I'm not going to let that stop me. So what am I
Right.
missing? What have the other chiefs of police done? I looked at chiefs of police throughout the country, and every single one of them shared a certain trait. Leadership was their number one thing, but they all shared education. They all had higher education.
Mm-hmm.
They all had gone to the FBI National Academy. They all
Okay.
had a lot of post-leadership training that I didn't have, and I didn't have formal education. So in the middle of my career, I thought, that's what I need to do. If this chief had not taken away my probationary period and left me as a patrol sergeant, I would still be there without formal education. I would not be here talking to you.
And you would have, yeah, that's true. I mean,
I would
you
not
would
be
have
here.
topped off.
I would have been content.
Yeah.
I would have been there, and I would have said, okay, this is as far as it gets. But I would not have what I have now. So what I did was, weeks after that happened, I started calling several schools throughout the country that are online, and I got accepted pretty quick, the University of Phoenix, and I never looked back, Ben. I
Nice.
never looked back, and I pushed myself, and I worked graveyard, and I park, I do my schoolwork in dark alleys,
Yeah.
parks, I do my schoolwork at home, wherever I could. We'd take small family trips.
And you got a family. You know, you're doing all this. You've got a family. You've got a job that's requiring a lot out of you. You know,
Correct.
and you got to have a huge sense of awareness of your situation.
Correct.
Because it's not just you. You're not in an office.
Correct.
You're out there handling issues of homicide. You're in there handling investigations, like you said. You're now working amongst peers outside of your formal police department because you're working on federal. So you're working with DEA task force. You're working a number of other agencies that are relying, and it's a small group. You know, when you're talking DEA, you're talking these other agencies, they're not large numbers of people. But what their importance on what they're trying to accomplish is
Correct.
really focused and diligent.
And that's what I did, Ben, as I
Yeah.
put myself through school. In the middle of going to school, another agency approached me and said, hey, we are rebranding our police department. We're doing something completely different. The old administration is gone, and we'd like for you to come work for us. And so I left the department where I worked,
Mm-hmm.
and I went to the Granger PD, and that's where I went to work, and immediately I got promoted to the rank of lieutenant because I had that experience. And shortly thereafter, I finished my associate's program.
Okay.
And as soon as I finished my associate's program, the chief of police who had hired me there, he quit and left, which vacated that position. And when the city started looking for a police chief, they advertised it, and I was not gonna apply for it. I remember I was not gonna apply for it. I wanted to finish my bachelor's degree and allow somebody to come in and take over, to continue to mentor me.
Right.
But my staff pushed me,
Mhm.
and
Your
because I
peers.
had spent a lot of time going out into the community and helping facilitate trust and rebuilding trust and integrity with the community, a lot of folks in the community pushed me to apply for the position. I applied, and we went through a series of tests, public hearings for the position.
Right.
There was actually a hiring committee that I had to go through, and they ended up hiring me.
Now, how long ago was that?
And that was, we're moving on 4 years now.
Okay.
Pretty close. And, you know, I was appointed as the chief of police, and as you know, with that came the opportunity to not only be the chief of police in my department, and I ended up rebranding it,
Right.
changing everything, being more involved in the community, having their opinion matter within the police department.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with that came the opportunity to work part-time and added more hours to my time, my personal time, to go work in another small department
Right.
and rebuild it, rebrand it, and reestablish it and bring it back from what it was. And I went on and did that, and that's how you and I met.
Absolutely, in Mapton.
In Mapton, correct.
I got to tell you, we had a failing police force. Not so much, you know, when you get new mayors and budgets are determined, sometimes what gets the axe is law enforcement. And we always, for me, the priority is health and safety of our people. And, you know, this is where I got the opportunity to meet Chief Araguz. And I got to tell you, I have a high regard and respect for Chief Araguz. You know, here he is, a couple of years into his Granger police chief. You know, he's got his education, he's gun-ho, and he knows how to work well with people. And then he goes ahead, takes on another responsibility to go ahead and help reestablish another police force, and that's both in Mapton, and that's where we met. And also, just recently, the city of Mattawa. And the reason why I'm going into this kind of little quickly is because I got to get ready to wrap things up. But his leadership is incredible. You know, he's got a lot of trust in the community and whatnot. And I guess what would you go ahead and say, Steve, is as you've been as police chief for over almost 5 years now, what is it that you would say, looking back, that you would want the people to know and know about the responsibilities and the privilege of representing them as the top cop? Could you, you know, give me a little bit?
You know, one of the things that my community knows about me, and yes, I took on another city after I had established the Mapton PD. I was pretty dumbfounded that another city would call me out of the blue and ask me to come do what I did for another city. So I'm doing that right now, and that's actually
Right on.
going really well. And just really quick, we are in search of a police chief for the city of Mattawa. So if you know anybody who's interested,
Okay.
the compensation is very competitive, very well, 100% paid benefits.
That's nice.
Great group of police officers that are already there. Currently, I am developing their training to have them be all specialty trainers in some form, firearms, DT, what have you. So
Okay.
the only thing we're looking for is a well-qualified, well-motivated police chief who understands the diversity of a small community. That's a strong mayor form of government. So with
Okay.
that said, you know, what I want my community to know about me is the number one thing is I can never, ever tell the community enough how much I appreciate them having the trust in me to be a part of their safety. I can never tell them enough how grateful I am for them to trust me to do that. You know, when I took over the city of Granger as the police chief,
Right.
it was tough. It came with some challenges. You know, they had a very
Publicized.
tumultuous time
yeah.
with the previous administration.
Yes, they
And
did.
building trust in the community was very tough. It was tough. But now, you know, I can walk anywhere in town, go in any business, and the community knows that the police department, no matter what, we're completely transparent now, and we're there for them, no
Right
matter
on.
what. And the community in return, the only thing they need to give us in return is their trust. You can trust us to always be fair. You can trust us to always be honest, and we are always going to give you answers, no matter whether they're easy or they're hard answers, but we're going to give them to you no matter what, because at the end of the day, we work for you. I would never have stepped into those boots when I was 14 years old if I didn't believe in what I just told you.
Right on.
I tell folks this all the time. I don't care what goes on social media. I don't care about, you know, the things that people say about this profession. That doesn't matter to me, and it shouldn't matter to any of us who are still doing this job. To us doing this job and the people who support us, and I'm talking about the correctional officers, I'm talking about the dispatchers, the clerks, records clerks, all those folks that are in this profession, to us, this is an honorable profession.
And it is.
It's full of trust, integrity. It's full of those things I spoke about with you at the beginning. We are here for you at the end of the day. Should anything terrible happen in your community or around your community, I can guarantee you 100% that somebody in a uniform is going to come and knock a door down to go yank you out of something terrible that's happening in your house, whether it's evil or a fire. Somebody in a uniform is going to come and do that. No matter how you perceive them through the lens of somebody else, through social media or the television, and I don't get into the whole
Right.
fake news. I don't get into none of that. That's for you folks to decide. I can guarantee you a form of uniform with some city logo patch on their shoulder is going to come tearing through a door to come yank you out and pull you away from evil or fire or to breathe life back into you.
Right on.
I can guarantee you that, and I can guarantee you that the next generation of police officers after we're gone is going to believe in that same thing, because even though throughout our 50 states we may train different, we may have different laws, we may have different political backing, it doesn't matter. We still all believe in that, and that's been a long-standing thing in this profession for over 150 years.
I gotta tell you, I'm inspired. You know, Chief Araguz, thank you so much, and I want to say some final words. I've known this gentleman for a few years already, when I was working in the administration of City of Mampton, and I've got to tell you, I love his drive. I love his sincerity. I love his genuineness. I love his integrity and the honor and the professionalism that he lives by. He lives by this code each and every day. And it's just not a job to him. He's out there. And I got to say, when he first got on and became a police chief, there was a lot of controversy happening in Granger, especially in that field. And today, after a few years, and there was a little bit of controversy on whether he should have been police chief, but I will say this: they made the right decision, and others around him in other communities asked for his advice, and he delivered. He delivered on bringing police forces back and re-strengthening them and bringing more people of high quality to those very small communities when budgets are always challenged. And so, if you ever get the privilege of talking about what he knows in his career field, you know what? You might want to just go ahead, open your ears, and listen to what he's got to say, because he knows what he's talking about. Sir, it was a privilege. Thank you very much, and God bless you in your endeavors. Right on.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.